Recently, I sat down with my roommate and we watched the 1996 Doctor Who movie. Now, here's the thing, I watched it once like 5 or 6 years ago in my attempt to watch everything Doctor Who after getting caught up on the modern series. And all I remembered was absolutely hating it. Specifically, I couldn't stand the idea that it made the Doctor half human, and specifically not in such a casual way. Myself and many other fans hated the idea of so lazily retconning a fact about the Doctor's origin without any real need for it. Nowadays, this doesn't seem like that bad of a change, but I'll touch on this point later. First, I want to say this. The Doctor Who movie is actually not that bad. Were there weird missteps? Sure, but all in all, it's a really fun experience. It's certainly overly goofy, but that's no different than the classic series. It has some confusing and forced romance, but there have been elements of that in the modern series. And yeah, it's ridiculously dated. It's incredibly apparent that this film was made in the 1990s, but there are elements of that in every era of Doctor Who. Need I remind you of that time Missy dabbed? So, I'm going to walk you through the good, the bad, and the confusing, and try to explain away some of the plot holes that this movie creates. First, the good. Paul McGann. This man is unmistakably the Doctor. He's got charm, gravitas, mystery. He does a fabulous job portraying a traveling alien hero, even with the less than stellar script that he was given. He's a great actor, and you can really feel how genuine and kind his character is, exactly as the Doctor should be. The scene that sold me? This really tiny one, where he realizes that his shoes fit just right, and he does a little dance like a 4-year-old, and then breaks into a jog. It's so goofy and silly, and so very Doctor Who. Even in McGann's later on-screen performance in Night of the Doctor, where he has to portray some much darker and heavier emotions, he still pulls it off with wit and levity. Even as a ship is crashing around him, he still manages to be a total ladies' man. Portraying the Doctor as a romantic was a new choice, one that I recognize a lot of fans hated. But I really like it, especially seeing as it was something that was sort of contained within the single generation. Well, mostly. Another thing that I quite liked about the movie was the title sequence. Obviously a huge improvement over the 7th Doctor's cheesy 80s titles, this cinematic version of the intro really advanced the idea that the time vortex was actually being shown behind the credits, not just some cool psychedelic images with zero correlation to the following story. And if you look closely, the multicolored web-like appearance of the vortex, it's actually very similar to the Russell T Davies titles that would be introduced a decade later. I also like the regeneration in this movie. We get to see an actual face morph from one Doctor to the next, something modern Who doesn't even consistently do. I do prefer the idea of regeneration having a single consistent appearance, but this was before that idea existed, and so I quite like it in this context. And the Master. Now, I'm not a fan of this portrayal, which we'll talk about soon, but I do really like the idea of the Master taking a page out of the Doctor's own book. I'm pretending that this is my TARDIS, so why not adopt my own companion? He and Chang Li having evil shenanigans while the Doctor palled around with Grace was a lot of fun. And lastly, I liked a lot of the goofy side characters. Some were more outrageously dumb than others, but it was refreshing seeing the writers put some thought into the personality of the people who were complete one-offs. There was no plan to ever portray them in Doctor Who again. This really gave the movie charm and a unique likability even in some of the worst scenes. Speaking of which, it's time we discuss the bad parts of this movie. I suppose that it's fitting. I love Paul McGann as the Doctor, but I cannot stand Eric Roberts' portrayal of the Master. He's this ridiculous, over-the-top evil madman who primarily uses manipulation to get what he wants. It's like they got the Spark Notes version of the Master, and then filled in the rest with this very hammy, very American performance. Why on earth would you make the Master American? And what's more, why play him up as this scary monster? He's supposed to be intimidating because of his intelligence. He's a foil to the Doctor. This Master is just a shouting lunatic that needs a refill on his eye drops. And not only is the character wrong, but so are his abilities. The writers of this film took some serious liberties with Time Lord biology. Why is the Master a liquid plasma snake? Why can he take over people's bodies? Why didn't this happen the last few times he was, quote, killed? And going off that idea, there are a lot of weird plot holes and contrivances in this film that I just don't get. The most obvious is the Doctor being half human. Not only is this a plot point that's directly contradicted by much of the previous lore of the show, but it doesn't make any sense for why the Doctor would reveal it now of all times. Was it supposed to be something he just recently discovered in his travels prior to the movie? Was it a suppressed memory that he reawakened only after his recent botched regeneration? Neither of these ideas were actually expressed in the film, so everyone watching is just left scratching their heads. And on the topic of the whole half-human debacle, why is it that humans' DNA is needed to open the Eye of Harmony? That doesn't make any sense. It's Time Lord technology, developed light years away on Gallifrey. That's like if the Americans programmed their nuclear missiles to only be accessible to 100% pure-blooded Mongolians. It's such a weird tactical choice that is never explained. That said, the Doctor is able to open the eye, so according to the logic of this film, he wasn't lying about being half-human. Now, I'll address how this can work in canon later, but this was seriously my biggest hang-up with the film the first time I watched it. I still don't like the Doctor being anything other than Time Lord. If you try to reduce his oddities to his genetics, you lose a lot of what makes him special. I talked about this in my video dissecting the Timeless Children, so I won't rehash it here. And with that, let's move on to the weird. These things certainly weren't good, but they have enough charm that I enjoy them regardless. First, this movie came out in 1996. If it had come out 10 or 15 years later, it would have been a complete meme factory. I'm talking on the same level as the Star Wars prequels. With all of the wacky shit that is packed into this film, I'm surprised more people don't recognize a lot of it. So I've compiled just a few memes here for you, stylized for different internet eras, just to give you a taste of what I'm talking about.
Steps foot in America. Immediately gets shot to death.
Mr. Anderson, I'm gonna kiss you right on the lips. Watch out.
I always dress for the occasion.
Avoid police brutality.
Shoot yourself first.
Beyond just the memes, there's a lot of very blatant, kind of strangely interpreted symbolism. He's a Time Lord, so let's absolutely stuff the TARDIS full of clocks. It'll be a clock that gets him to question his identity. It's an atomic clock that lets him save the day at the end. Instead of considering an idea and creatively implementing it, they just slap it on top of the story like a layer of neon paint. It's the same way with the Jelly Babies. This is a candy that the fourth Doctor famously loved. And sure, we get callbacks to the other Doctors. I know I saw number 2's flute in there at one point, but the Jelly Babies, they just keep popping up over and over and over again throughout the story. That is the fourth Doctor's thing. How would you like it if 12 jumped around in a bow tie? That said, I didn't put this into the bad category because the implementation is so goofy that I can't help but laugh every single time the Jelly Babies are on screen. And the last bit of weird symbolism, the Doctor is Jesus and the Master is the devil. I mean, it's kind of hilarious how much this idea is pushed throughout the movie. The Master literally turns into a serpent. He whispers sweet lies into the ears of his victims, tricking them into doing evil. He even dresses in a black and red robe over a giant smoking pit. He's the devil. The Doctor is obviously Jesus. He dies, rises from the dead, bursts forth from his tomb, the guard is found passed out, he dresses in a white robe, half Time Lord, half human, just like half god, half human. He even dons a crown of thorns at the end of the film. Now, I don't know what to make of this. It's very clearly just lazy writing, but dang if it doesn't make for a very fun watching experience. So, now that I've sorted through the good, the bad, and the ugly, I want to address the plot holes. 2 specifically. Is the Doctor half human? And why does the Eye of Harmony only open for human DNA? Well, both can be answered using material that came out after the movie. First, the Doctor's origin. Yes, they did intend for him to be only half Time Lord when writing this film, but consider the following. Chameleon arches exist. The Doctor understands and has experienced tampering with his own genetics. And he's a very well-known liar. Even if he didn't use a chameleon arch at some point before or during the film, there's another potential explainer. In Smith and Jones, it's shown that the Doctor can mask his biological appearance using an olfactory trick, and all it needs is a kiss from a human. And in the film, the Doctor does the mouth mambo with Grace a few times. It's a stretch, but I think it's plausible to say, especially with so much evidence against this new development, that the Doctor is not actually half human. As for human DNA opening the Eye of Harmony, that was explained away in The Apocalypse Element, a Big Finish 6th Doctor audio drama released in 2000, which outlines a battle between the Daleks and the Time Lords. Daleks had been killing Time Lords and stealing their eyes, using their retinal prints to use Time Lord technology. The Doctor stopped them by rewriting all Time Lord tech to only respond to the DNA of his human companion of the time, Evelyn. After the Daleks were defeated and peace restored, he reverted the Gallifreyan technology, but noted that his own TARDIS might still suffer some ill effects from the transfer. And boom, there you go, plot holes smoothed over. Now, I want to clarify that this section is absolutely not a defense of the movie. In the past, I've seen some people apply similar headcanons or later written explanations to episodes like The Timeless Children as a way to defend the writing. I am not doing that. The half-human inclusion in the 1996 movie was really bad. It's a flaw of the writing, and I will not defend it. This explanation is purely for us fans, so we have a way to smooth over this flaw in our own heads. In a perfect world, we would not need to apply this sort of fix. All that said, the Doctor Who movie actually had a far bigger impact on the franchise than most of us probably realize. It paved the way for the modern series, influencing a ton of the RTD era. The inclusion of romantic elements between the Doctor and companions, looking into the heart of the TARDIS to gain unlimited power, the Master hiding in plain sight as a human, and the weird post-death powers he would receive after coming back to life. I mentioned it before, but even the time vortex looks very similar. It's obvious RTD intended Series 1 to be a continuation right after the end of Paul McGann's run as the 8th Doctor. Speaking of which, Paul McGann has gone on to do so much work with Big Finish, a lot of which really deserves a listen if you haven't given him a chance. His era of Doctor Who may seem less legitimate to a lot of people, understandably, but he paved the way for what Doctor Who could be in the 21st century. He is undeniably the Doctor. Please remember to like, subscribe, ring that bell, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I want to say thank you to all of my patrons, with a special thanks to Evilly Nice Nava. Your help is what makes these videos and my larger projects possible. Stay frosty.